Hello, my name is Sophie Russell, and I'm going to explain a literary device known as foreshadowing. First of all, what is foreshadowing? In literature, foreshadowing is used by an author to give a hint of what is to come later in the narrative. Foreshadowing often appears at the beginning of a novel or chapter and helps the reader develop expectations about future events in a text. Foreshadowing often creates an atmosphere of suspense so that the readers are interested to know more. Here is an example from the novel Tomorrow When the War Began, written by John Marsden. A year's break from the show wouldn't do us any harm, or so we thought. This last line, or so we thought, gives the reader a hint that there will be harm caused by the teenagers going away from the show this year. And notice how it's been placed on its own line as well, which gives it some dramatic effect. Here is another example from Tomorrow When the War Began. Sometimes another friend would come along, Robin or Fee usually. Never boys. At that age you think boys have as much personality as coat hangers and you don't notice their looks. Then you grow up. That last line, then you grow up, hints to the audience that these girls are coming of age, they have attractions to boys, and that relationships will probably emerge throughout the narrative. Here is a longer example from The Fellowship of the Ring from the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. What a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had a chance. Pity, it was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy not to strike without need. I am sorry, said Frodo, but I am frightened and I do not feel any pity for Gollum. You have not seen him, Gandalf broke in. No, and I don't want to, said Frodo. I can't understand you. Do you mean to say that you and the elves have let him live on after all those horrible deeds? Now at any rate he is as bad as an orc and just an enemy. He deserves death. Deserves it? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. I have not much hope that Gollum can be cured before he dies, but there is a chance of it, and he is bound up with the fate of the ring. My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before the end, and when that comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not least. That last line that I've bolded that because that is the key foreshadowing in the passage. Because for those of us that have read or watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, we know that Gollum does end up playing a very important part at the end, for good, as if he was not there at the end to take the ring from Frodo and then fall into Mount Doom, then that ring probably would never have been destroyed. Here is another example from the novel Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, which is a Year 11 text at the school. George snapped his fingers sharply, and at the sound Lenny laid the mouse in his hand. I wasn't doing nothing bad with it, George, just stroking it. George stood up and threw the mouse as far as he could into the darkening brush, and then he stepped to the pool and washed his hands. You crazy fool, I ain't taking it away just for meanness. That mouse ain't fresh, Lenny, and besides, you've broke it petting it. You get another mouse that's fresh, and I'll let you keep it a little while. Lenny sat down on the ground and hung his head dejectedly. I don't know where there is no other mouse. I remember a lady used to give 'em to me, ever she got one, but that lady ain't here. George scoffed. Lady, huh? Don't even remember who that lady was. That was your own Aunt Clara, and she stopped giving 'em to you. You always killed 'em. Lenny looked sadly up at him. They were so little, he said apologetically. I'd pet 'em, and pretty soon they bit my fingers, and I pinched their heads a little, and then they was dead, because they were so little. Later on in the novel, there's another instance where Lenny kills an animal by accident. It reads, Lenny sat in the hay and looked at a little dead puppy that lay in front of him. Lenny looked at it for a long time, and then he put out his huge hand and stroked it clear from one end to the other, and Lenny said softly to the puppy, Why'd you got to get killed? You ain't so little as mice. I didn't bounce you hard. He bent the pup's head up and looked in its face, and he said to it, Now maybe George ain't gonna let me tend no rabbits if he finds out you got killed. These examples of foreshadowing show Lenny's tendency to get carried away with touching soft, silky things, and this is the author's way of foreshadowing the end event of the novel, which is Lanny's tragic encounter with Curly's wife, when she says to him, you can feel my hair if you like, it's very soft. So just to wrap up, let's look at the function of foreshadowing again. The function of foreshadowing is to build anticipation in the minds of readers about what might happen next, and thus adding dramatic tension to a story. Foreshadowing can also make extraordinary and bizarre events appear credible as they are predicted beforehand, so that readers are mentally prepared for them. Thank you, that's all.